So, as promised, let's return to our main story, the earthquake in Mexico. We were watching only a few minutes ago the live pictures coming to us from the school. Let's talk in the next few minutes to my guest here, Joshua Macabau, who's a search and rescue engineer specialising in the extraction of live casualties from collapsed buildings. And joining me is also Piña Miron-Tabasa, who lives in Mexico City. Thank you, both of you, for being here with us. To you, first of all, because we've been watching these scenes on our television screens of the rescues hour after hour, people very, very gently, delicately working. Take me through the sorts of things that those teams on the ground will be focusing on.
Well, the first thing is to find out where to go. So it's not necessarily obvious where the collapsed buildings are when you're looking at a large, wide area. That'll be the responsibility of the local emergency management authority. Once they have prioritised locations, they'll be sending the teams to those. And when the teams are there, they'll be searching the buildings using things like search dogs. Those dogs, which I believe you will have already seen, will be able to distinguish between the scent of live people and otherwise trapped in the building. They'll then be using equipment such as snake cameras and sensitive sounding equipment. And
snake cameras, what do you mean by that?
Well, a snake camera is basically a camera that's on the end of a long articulatable pole. So if you have an opening or a void that you want to explore, then you can put the camera inside and you can move it around with a light, etc. But more useful than that, perhaps, is the sounding equipment. I think you've seen footage of people standing around silently, and that's quite important, because what you're doing is you place microphones at different locations on the building. You make sure that there's complete silence around, which isn't always easy to achieve. And if you do that, you then make a signal, such as hitting the structure, waiting for a sound of some kind of survivor, and then you move the microphones accordingly to hone in on the location.
And of course we heard that official say that they'd made contact with a 13-year-old, they'd been able to pass down food and water as they attempt to get to her. But take me through the difficulties, because they are numerous, aren't they? I was reading one account from overnight, which was a rescuer rushing away for advice because he didn't know whether to actually head towards a sound that he could hear or a different part where he thought there was a bigger group. I mean, those are the sorts of dilemmas, presumably, they're having to deal with on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And in this disaster, in any disaster, there's a question of priority. There's a question of saying, well, there's a known victim here, but there might be unknown greater number of victims there. The important thing is coordination and passing information back as much as possible. So in those kind of situations where you have a number of locations to go to, it's very important the information is passed back to the coordinating body to say, I am committed here, there may be more people there, so that might be a solution in that case.
Let me bring in Piña, who's been listening to that. Just give me an idea, first of all, I mean, what was it like actually living through that earthquake? You've lived through others. How different was this one?
This one was definitely the worst I've ever felt, and I was actually thinking, is this gonna be it? It was that strong. It felt really bad in the city.
So did you think that the building that you were in, were you at home? Did you think that building would collapse? Were you at home or were you at work?
I was at the office, and we are actually like 6 kilometers from buildings, a place where quite many buildings fell down. And I considered my office building quite safe, and we are on the 4th floor, and it felt bad and it sounded bad.
In terms of the rescue efforts that are going on right across the city, a lot of focus on the school, but those sorts of scenes are being replicated, aren't they, in many, many different places?
Yes, there are centers where people, they are arriving with cars loaded items in order to help people, to feed the people who are helping out, digging out people from the buildings that collapsed. It's amazing. I'm really amazed by the Mexican people working all together.
Let me bring Joshua back in and the live pictures, because we were just seeing that official again with their hand held up as they think that they may have heard something that's relevant. Joshua, as you watch this, give me an idea of time frame. We're rapidly approaching 48 hours. On a rescue like this, where are we on that timeline? What is 48 hours? Is that very late in the day, or is there still significant hope?
There's still significant hope. So with other rescues in past disasters, you might be finding people up to a week after the earthquake. That would be very rare. Normally you are looking at the first 48, 72 hours to get most people, but crucially it's whether or not those people are in survivable voids. So in Nepal, for example, where you have complete collapse and there's no real space for people to survive, it's not possible to last that long. But here, where you've got concrete structures that have pancaked, then you do have the possibility of having slabs up against walls, so there's voids inside for people to survive.
Little pockets where somehow you've got a little space that you survive. Give me an idea emotionally what this work is like.
Well, all of the rescuers here will be under a lot of stress. So most of the people that you're seeing on the TV will be local or Mexican rescuers, given the time frame, and there may be international rescuers on the way. En route, there'll be a lot of frustration for them because they want to get there faster. There might be roads down, airports down, other kinds of challenges. When you're there, you're very aware of the uncertainty. You don't know where to go. You mentioned a guy who didn't know if he should prioritise A over B. You really feel that stress. And when you're working on a site like that, you're very conscious of the eyes of all the people around watching you, because they may well be the mothers, the fathers of the people that you're looking for.
Do you know what? I hadn't thought of that. You're absolutely right, because we see, not in these shots, but there are crowds waiting there. All of these hours, 48 hours, family desperately hoping that the people like you manage to pull their loved ones out. In terms of the emotions that you talk us through, how difficult is it when you eventually have to make that decision to actually stop looking, to stop dig?
Yeah, that's a very difficult decision. There are good examples in my team, Saraid, in Haiti, where we had that problem, and after 24 hours of trying to reach someone, it was deemed that they were no longer alive. And I know that really hit the team very hard. So it's something that's incredibly difficult, but at the same time, you are a limited resource among a pool of limited resources, and you really have to try and get to the people that may still be alive. So if you have to move on, it's probably for a good reason.
Pinia, let me bring you back in. I mean, it's a couple of days. I'm sure it hasn't dissipated the fear that you actually went through. Have there been aftershocks? Are you still nervous about perhaps a major aftershock happening?
As far as I've felt, there hasn't been any aftershocks. I think there have been few, not that strong to feel them. There is a sense of quietness in the city. Actually, yesterday in the morning, it was even a bit scary because it was so quiet. Normally, the city has a sound coming all the time behind you. You just hear sounds, and yesterday in the morning it was totally quiet, and there is a sense of sorrow, mourning that you can actually feel here.
That's really interesting. Joshua, just a final thought, because you've worked in so many places in situations like this, Haiti, Nepal, you're just back from Irma. Do any of the people that you actually managed to save, do you keep in contact with them? Do you ever hear back?
Well, I know there are examples of team members who have done just that. You know, they do try and stay in touch. I mean, obviously it's a very chaotic situation, so a lot of the time people are just disappear, and you're not really going to exchange contact details. But you do occasionally keep it, and obviously that's a hugely gratifying thing and contact for the people that manage to see where their efforts have ended up.
Well, Joshua, thank you so much for coming in and explaining a little of what we've been seeing over the last few hours and days. And Pinia there, thank you there in Mexico City. Thank you.